Ending 1. Game over. Unlock condition. Die at any point, except against Pinkie Pie. Pinkie felt the monster crunch down on her, its teeth bearing into her flesh. She tried to fight it. She tried to fend for herself, but had been too much. Pain soared through her body as the last of her screams faded out. She felt the life escape her body. "Pinkie Pie?" Twilight said, staring in shock as her pink pony friend, laying on the ground, was not moving. "Pinkie Pie! Wake up!" Twilight shook her friend. No response came. "What's happening? Pinkie Pie! Pinkie Pie! Pinkie Pie!" Twilight cried with all her might. It was too late, though. Pinkie Pie was gone. Ending 2. It's time to get baking. Unlock condition. Lose to Pinkie Pie. "I'll finish you!" The other Pinkie sputtered out more blood as she gripped the butcher's knife as best she could with her hoof, dragging it along the ground as she began to walk towards Pinkie. Pinkie took in sharp breaths of air as she concentrated on the vile pink mare before her. The other Pinkie began picking up pace before going into a full-on run straight for Pinkie. She seemed groggy, but determined to bring that knife down into Pinkie's flesh. Pinkie had aimed the uninjured half of her body at the other Pinkie, bringing her hind hoof up once more. The butcher's knife was raised into the air, sparks flying as it had scraped along the ground. The frantic rush of the other Pinkie was closing in, ready to strike down. For a moment, everything seemed to hold still, right on the edge of death. Two forces that never should have met collided. There was silence for a moment, before the soft sound of a thud, a body hitting the ground. Pinkie's eyes were half opened, in a mixed state of daze and pain. She could barely register the pain of the butcher's knife that was buried in her back. The other Pinkie pulled, freeing the knife struck in her back, but after a few yanks, it pulled free. The other Pinkie, despite bleeding from the mouth, couldn't help but give a broad smile on her face. She began to laugh as her victim laid there. She raised the knife and brought it down with tremendous force on her leg. She slammed the knife down into the same exact spot again and again, blood splattering everywhere as she worked. All Pinkie could hear was the dull thuds of the knife as it struck her body. She couldn't move or even scream. She could only lay there as blood poured from her body. The other Pinkie was moving, but it barely registered. The distant thuds of the knife escaped her. She couldn't feel her body anymore, and her mind was fading. The dull, rhythmic sound of the thuds seemed to lull her to sleep. "Aw, she's gone already?" Pinkie pouted as she looked at the dismembered body before her. After all, she had finished cutting off her limbs. She had gone and cleaned up her mouth. She was missing a lot of teeth, but she could talk again. "Phooey, she fought too much. I killed her before I had a chance to play." She let out a sigh of disappointment. "Oh well, I'm sure I can still have all sorts of fun with what I have left." She chuckled, bouncing a little, as she thought to herself, "I'll make sure she gets put to good use. After all, there's no point in just letting her die without doing something." She laughed as she thought about all the things she could do with the body. She grabbed the scalpel carefully as she walked over to it. She carefully placed the knife against the body, about to slice off the cutie mark for her to add it to her dress. The perfect accessory. The scalpel slipped from her hoof. "Huh?" she said, looking at the scalpel oddly. "I've never been klutzy about my tools before," she said, as she reached down to grab the scalpel. However, it slipped right through her grip. She swiped at it several times in rapid succession, but it continued to hold no grip. "What in the name of all things sweet and sugary is going on here?" she asked, confused. As she looked at the hoof, she could partially see through it. "Oh, silly me!" She laughed. "I'm disappearing!" She watched with a smile as more of her leg began to fade away. Her hoof was missing. She lifted a leg as she watched the vanishing act reach her body. "I guess it's time for me to head on out." She laughed to herself. "This world was a lot of fun. I can't wait to see where I'm being taken now." She smiled as her body began to disappear. Her entire being soon vanished from the realm. Twilight backed up, shaking her head groggily. She rubbed her forehead, not sure exactly what had happened, though she could tell it had only been a few minutes. She looked up and saw her friend Pinkie Pie sitting there with her eyes closed. "Pinkie Pie, are you all right?" Twilight asked, looking at her friend. Slowly, Pinkie's eyes opened. She blinked once or twice, looking at her friend Twilight, then up and around the library. She then looked down at her own body. It took a moment, but very slowly, a smile began to appear on her face. "Pinkie Pie?" Twilight asked again. Pinkie closed her eyes as she began to shake. The smile began to wobble as she felt a surge of emotions flowing through her body. "Oh my gosh!" Pinkie Pie cried out, suddenly jumping into the air as her hair burst out into its usual frizz, her coat going back to its bright color. She bounced around the room excitedly. Oh my gosh, Twilight! This is so much better!" She laughed as she bounced giddily around the house. Really? The mind delve worked?" Twilight said, smiling at her friend, who seemed to be back to her old self. "Oh, did it ever?" she said, stopping short of her friend, the biggest smile on her face. "Thank you, Twilight! Thank you! She gave her purple unicorn friend a mighty, squeezing hug. Twilight couldn't help but let out a chuckle. "Well, I'm glad I could help, and that you're feeling better." Twilight smiled happily. "Oh, I feel great. I feel even better than I did before, when I was happy." She let out a sigh of content. "So, this calls for only one thing." She raised her legs in the air. "A party! And I'm going to invite every pony in Ponyville!" She cheered as she hopped out of Twilight's house to quickly get the preparations going. Well, seeing her happy again certainly makes up for seeing the images that were in her head. Twilight chuckled, rubbing her head, thankful to have been helpful to her friend. Pinkie began bouncing toward Sugar Cube Corner, overfilled with joy. "Wow, I really feel like I've gotten a new lease on life." She giggled to herself as she looked around, seeing all the happy ponies of Ponyville going about their day. She knew every pony in Ponyville, after all. They were all so happy. She was happy that they were, and she was so happy that she could be bringing that happiness to them. "But there's really so many of them here," she said, remembering just how many ponies lived there. "And I certainly don't want to seem like I'm going to give any ponies a special treatment." She smiled as she thought to herself, "Oh, I know. I'll make a numbering system. That way, I can pick ponies without playing favorites." She chuckled happily to herself. "I can't pick ponies too often, though. Otherwise, it'll seem suspicious when they start disappearing." She had a big smile on her face. "But I just can't wait. It's going to take forever to get my dress sewn together again. But getting to play with all the ponies is going to be so much fun. And of course, I can't forget to make my super duper, wonderfully fantastic special cupcakes while I'm at it." Pinkie Pie bounced merrily to set up the party at Sugar Cube Corner. The end. Ending 3. It's a twist. Unlock condition. Don't see all the memories before facing Slendermane for the first time. She opened the door, stepping out. Outside the door, she saw 4 torches lit around an open arena. The pathway was lit for her leading up to it. A fence was placed along the path and arena so she couldn't go anywhere else. She gently put her lantern away as she walked towards the center of the arena. She could feel small tremors shaking through the world as she walked. As she reached one side of the arena, from the ground on the opposite side, Slender Pony emerged. He stood tall over her, his presence still bearing down. The truth, Pinkie whispered to herself, as she stared at the Slender Pony, her phonograph letting off a slight buzz. I see. It's the truth behind everything, isn't it? Something I've been hiding from. Something that you show me. She tried to rationalize everything. The Slender Pony began to walk slowly towards her, the haze of his presence beginning to attack her mind. She closed her eyes as she tried to think. The steps of the Slender Pony echoed through the room as the haze grew deeper in her head. An image of Bellamina appeared in her mind through the haze. The image was strong, it was loud, and it spoke to her. Her eyes shot open, the realization dawning upon her as the Slender Pony stood only a few feet away. The phonograph was ringing like it had never rang before. I must fight through. Pinkie gulped as her mind fogged. I've managed through monsters, this town of horrors, even myself. I'll beat you too. Pinkie fought through the blurring haze, lifting her front hoof and pressing it against the Slender Pony's body. A wave of pain rocked her body as she cried out. The haze enveloped her mind. She felt a torrential sea of different experiences crashing through her body as she became overwhelmed by the Slender Pony. The image of Bellamina swirled in her head. She could see some of the memories that she had lost. She saw herself as Bellamina. She saw the pain of another young filly being tortured by the colt that was the Slender Pony. She felt the influx of horrible emotions invade her body. Emotions she didn't want to be real. No, they couldn't be real. These things hadn't happened to someone she cared so much about. She couldn't accept these horrors as they were presented to her. Her sister was too precious. The images told her that Bellamina was dead, but she couldn't accept the truth. The world escaped her as she felt herself falling again. Everything swirled. Her head was spinning. Pain filled her senses before she finally lost her bearings. Twilight pulled her head back from Pinkie Pie's forehead. She rubbed her head as she looked at her pink friend. She wasn't sure exactly what had just happened, but she knew it hadn't been longer than a few minutes. Pinkie was still standing there, with her eyes closed. Pinkie, are you all right? She asked her friend. It was a moment of quietness before Pinkie slowly opened her eyes, looking at Twilight. You okay? Twilight asked, getting a little closer to Pinkie. Pinkie simply blinked in response. Did the mind delve work? She asked, looking into Pinkie's eyes for a response. Twilight? Pinkie said, almost as if surprised to see her. Yeah, it's me, Pinkie Pie. Are you feeling any better now? Twilight asked, trying to gauge where her friend was. Pinkie didn't really answer. She looked down at her hooves, then back to Twilight, then began to slowly scan the contents of the library. So, this is really true, isn't it? Pinkie muttered softly, before lowering her head, her hair covering most of her face, as she closed her eyes. Pinkie? It's all right. I'm here. You can talk to me. Twilight said, trying to reassure her friend. Thank you, Twilight, Pinkie said solemnly. You have helped me. You've made me realize the truth about myself. She muttered quietly. The truth about yourself? What is it? Twilight asked curiously. Pinkie shifted her head away from Twilight, opening her eyes, but not looking at her. I'm not Pinkie Pie, she said quietly. And I never was. Huh? Twilight asked confused. But, of course you're Pinkie Pie. You're the friend we've come to know and love here. Ponyville's #1 party pony. Twilight explained. Yes, that's what you've come to know me as, because that's the identity I adopted. Pinkie softly sighed as she raised her head to look at Twilight. Twilight, the dreams I was having, they stemmed from a trauma I survived as a child. Your Mind Delve spell helped me realize that. And now, I've dealt with the trauma thanks to your spell. I've come to realize I'm not Pinkie Pie. She took a deep breath. My name is Bellamina Marie Pie. She spoke clearly. My sister, Pinkamena Diane Pie, died when we were kids. I wasn't able to accept that my sister, who put a smile on all of our faces, who was the cheerful party lover, died in such a tragic way all those years ago. So, in my mind, I made myself die in her place, and I took over as Pinkamena. She closed her eyes as she turned her body to face Twilight. This cutie mark is real, but it was summoned up because my mind made it my special talent, so that I could be my sister. Bellamina sighed. I've been dyeing my fur and hair for as long as I can remember, just to hide this fact. Pinkie, Twilight said in shock. It seemed like a lot to take in, like it shouldn't be real. It's Bellamina, Twilight, she said, almost hurt that she had to correct this person she had come to know as her friend. I can't keep living the lie anymore. Doing so was tearing me apart inside. So, I need to come clean with who I am. Bellamina stood up and walked towards one of the bookshelves. Don't get me wrong, though. I've become a lot like my sister now. So, who I am will still be a lot like her, Bellamina said, trying to dispel any worry in her friend. I guess I won't be as hectic as I was when I was Pinkie. She turned to Twilight, a weak smile appearing on her face. And I'll need help telling the others, if that's all right. Twilight stared, a little dumbfounded. She seriously had to take in all this news. It was almost too much to bear. This is real, isn't it? Twilight said, almost unable to believe it. Bellamina nodded her head slowly. Then, I guess what choice do I have? Twilight said, taking a deep breath before standing up and smiling. This is the real you, right? And you, even though you might not be Pinkie Pie, are still my dear friend. If you need help, then I will help you. Thank you, Twilight. Bellamina smiled, as a tear formed at the edge of her eye. The end. Ending 4. UFO. Unlocked condition. Get the channeling stone from Twilight's house and use it in various locations. Pinkie Pie held up the channeling stone outside of Sugarcube Corner. Huh? She said, looking up and seeing a strange light appear in the sky. A light? She asked, staring at the strangely shaped light before it began to move, before disappearing into the dark sky. Pinkie Pie held up the channeling stone outside of the schoolhouse. Hey, there's that light again, she said, looking up at the sky. It had returned, sitting there, in its strange, glowing wonder. It seemed to spin around before rushing out and disappearing into the sky. Pinkie Pie held up the channeling stone outside of the abandoned house. What's that light doing? She asked no one, as the light seemed to be making a figure 8 in the sky. It spun around several times before once again vanishing as quickly as it had come. Pinkie Pie held up the channeling stone outside of the otherworldly Sugarcube Corner. That light even appears here? She said, surprised to see it make its return. Oh, hey, wait! She cried out as she noticed it was acting jittery, as if it was having difficulty staying in the air. The light then suddenly began to take a nosedive, as it flew off into the distance and crashed beyond the horizon in a place she couldn't see. What was that about? She asked herself, confused. She opened the wooden door at the top of the farmhouse stairs. Inside was a long hallway, with another wooden door at the end of it. Stepping into the hallway, she found it odd that there was just a hallway here. No marks on the wall, nothing that indicated having a hallway here would serve a purpose, other than connecting the top of the stairs to the room at the other end of it. She walked across the hallway to the other door, and put her hoof on it to open it. Suddenly, the door raised into the ceiling, rather than opening normally, and a bright light shined through the door. What? She asked, though it was muffled by the lantern in her mouth. Suddenly, she felt the lantern and her bag being lifted off of her, raising into the sky. Hey, give those back, she said, shocked that they were being taken away. They drifted through the bright door, almost as if vanishing into the light. Pinkie Pie, despite how bright it was, walked through the door of light. Okay, this is kind of hard to explain, so there's a comic here. Pinkie walks into the alien spaceship and says, "Ha-ha," and there's an alien, and then her friends are standing around it, and Twilight says, "Pinkie Pie, you finally made it." And then another panel, it says, Oh my gosh, girls, you're all here," says Pinkie Pie. And then Rainbow Dash puts her arm around Pinkie and says, "Come on, Pinkie, let's go on a grand adventure." And then Rainbow Dash is Nyan Cat in space, and she's saying "for adventure," and it's going yeah. Just link in the description if you want to see the actual thing, because yeah. Anyhow, moving on. Ending 5. The Truth. Unlock condition. Clear the game and see every hidden truth. Twilight pulled her head back, rubbing her forehead as she groaned. The spell was taxing, not to mention she had held it for minutes already. She shook her head before looking at her pink friend. Pinkie had her eyes closed. "Pinkie, you all right?" Twilight asked, not sure if she had been released from the effects of the spell yet. It took a moment, but soon Pinkie's eyes slowly opened. "You okay? It wasn't too much, was it?" Twilight asked, a little worried about her friend. Pinkie simply blinked, before smiling and lowering her head, closing her eyes. Twilight blinked, a little confused at this behavior. "Thank you, Twilight," were the first words to leave Pinkie's mouth. "Oh, did it work?" Twilight asked, softly smiling. "It did, and I thank you so much for helping me," Pinkie said, lifting her head, letting Twilight see the smile on Pinkie's face. "If you hadn't helped me, who knows what would have happened? I mean, I probably would have been driven insane." She twirled her eyes in example, then chuckled at herself. "But I won't now, and it's all thanks to you." "Oh, well, I was doing it to help a friend in need," Twilight said, smiling, accepting the compliments in her usual manner. "This has been a pretty crazy experience," Pinkie chuckled. "So, I hope I'm not prying, but you know what was causing those nightmares now?" Twilight asked curiously. "I do," Pinkie said, but shifted her head a little. "But I'll tell you about it later, I promise. Right now," she stood up, "I have a few things I need to take care of. I hope you don't mind." "Oh, but of course. I'm just happy I was able to help." Twilight smiled. Pinkie smiled back as she headed towards Twilight's door. A thought struck her, and she stopped. "Oh, hey, Twilight. Before I go, I need 2 favors," Pinkie said happily. "Sure. What do you need?" Twilight asked curiously. "Well, first, I'll need you to cast the cloud walking spell on me. And second, do you have any red ribbon on you?" Pinkie asked curiously. Rainbow Dash was getting in a good afternoon nap in her home when she was awoken by several knocks on her door. What?" she said as she stirred from her sleep. Her ears wiggled as she heard the door being knocked on. Yeah, hold your horseshoes, I'm coming. She yawned, stretching as she woke up. She walked over to the door and opened it up. Almost instantly, she was assaulted by a pink blur that proceeded to hug her, knocking her over onto her back. What the? She said in surprise, before realizing her assaulter was Pinkie Pie. Oh, Pinkie Pie! Rainbow Dash was sitting up slowly. What's the idea? You know it's my nap time. Rainbow shook her head as Pinkie slowly let go. I know, and I'm sorry for waking you. Pinkie smiled. A lot has happened to me, and I really just wanted to see you. Well, that's alright then. I certainly can't abandon a friend in need, Rainbow Dash said, brushing her hair with a hoof. So, what's on your mind, Pinks? It's a really long story, Dash. A long and, well, rather sad one, Pinkie said with a hint of melancholy in her voice. And I'm more than willing to tell you, but I hope you don't mind if I keep you waiting a little while you hear the story. Pinkie ran a hoof through her hair. I still have some things I need to deal with before I'm really ready to tell other ponies about it. A sad story. That's not like you, Pinkie Pie. You're always about being upbeat, fun, and having a good time. What could be so sad you need something... Did something recently happen to you? Rainbow asked a little curiously about her friend. Pinkie giggled a little, smiling at Dash. You'll know when you hear it. Just trust me for the moment. After all, I came here to hang out with you for a little while, if you don't mind. Of course not. A visit from my gal pals is always welcome. Rainbow smiled as she flew over to another part of the house. Would you like a snack? I got some fresh apples from Applejack. They're really good. That sounds delightful, Pinkie said, walking further into Rainbow's house. Rainbow returned with the apples, the two ponies sharing the snacks together. They talked, they laughed, they reminisced about some of the adventures they had been on since Twilight had arrived in town. Rainbow thought it a little weird that Pinkie was being so sentimental, but figured she must have a good reason. They spent a good few hours just hanging out in her home. So Pinkie, Rainbow said, after they had just finished a conversation about possible pranks they could pull in the future. What's with the red ribbon in your hair? Rainbow asked curiously. Pinkie turned her head to look at the red ribbon she had tied into a bow on her mane. She smiled softly, before looking at Rainbow Dash. Well, let's just say it's helping me remember my dear friends I really have. She chuckled. I didn't know you needed a ribbon for that. After all, we're all right here. Rainbow Dash smiled, putting a hoof on her chest. I know, Pinkie laughed. But I did need a reminder. She gently nuzzled her hair with the ribbon attached to it, then smiled softly, before looking up at Rainbow Dash. Dash, I'm going away for a while, Pinkie announced to her. Huh? Rainbow said, almost spitting out the apple juice she had been sipping on. Going away? But why? I've got something I need to take care of, Pinkie said, looking away from Rainbow Dash, though still smiling. I'm going out to see my sister, Octavia. Well, we could go with you, you know. You don't have to go alone, Rainbow explained. I know, but this is really something I have to do myself. She chuckled as she batted her straight hair with a hoof. Especially if I want this to be poofy again. So, you're sure this is what you need? Rainbow Dash asked once again. It is. Pinkie smiled, looking at Rainbow Dash. Dash looked conflicted. She certainly didn't want Pinkie to go away, but she also had to support her friend. Hey, you gotta do what you gotta do, right? Rainbow said, putting on a strong face and gently hitting Pinkie's shoulder. Besides, you'll be coming back, right? Of course I will. I can never abandon you or the other girls here in Ponyville. You're my bestest friends ever. I couldn't think of what life would be like without you all, Pinkie explained happily. Then go ahead. We'll see you off, of course. Though things will be mighty quiet without you around, Rainbow said, smiling. I know. I bring so many smiles here, which is why I could never stay away for long. Pinkie chuckled again. Classical music filled the halls. The small group of ponies played on the stage to a large crowd. Their instruments were finely tuned. They never missed a beat or a chord, as they all played in perfect harmony. The very soul of their music resonated through the hall and the hearts of all the ponies attending. The final chords were played, and the auditorium was filled with applause as they took their bows. The curtains came to a close on the stage as the band members began to pack up their instruments. "This was probably our best performance yet," Beauty Brass said as she put her sousaphone away in its case. "I don't know. I still feel like we could do better," Frederick said as his piano was pushed off to the side. "I still say we should add some of Beethoven's earlier works. His later work is magnificent, but doesn't compare to the wonderment of his earlier provided," Harpo said as his harp was carted off. "We sounded fantastic, guys. Don't worry too much about it." Octavia chuckled at her fellow bandmates. "It was a great performance, so we got a well-deserved night of rest." Octavia smiled as she placed her contrabass into its container. She pulled the strap over her shoulders, placing the instrument on her back. She always refused help with putting her beloved instrument away. "Hey, you're not supposed to be here," the band heard the security guard say loudly. They turned their heads to see what he was yelling at. "I know, but my sister's in the band, and I really need to talk to her," Pinky begged at the security guard. "We didn't hear anything about any of the band members getting a visit today," the security guard said, grabbing Pinky by the leg. Hey, I'm not lying," Pinky said, trying to get the security guard to let go. "It's okay, sir," Octavia said, walking up to the guard. "She's my sister, though she did come by rather unannounced," Octavia said, looking at Pinky curiously, before noticing that her hair was straight, something she hadn't seen in a long time. "Well, all right. If the band says you're okay, then you are. Just don't come in unannounced next time." The security guard huffed and then walked off. "Hey, do you need some time to yourself?" Beauty asked as she walked up to Octavia. "Yeah, sorry guys. Go on ahead and do your own things. I'll see you back at the hotel later." Octavia smiled. Beauty Brass understood and walked off with the rest of the band. "Sorry, sis. I probably should have given you more warning. Then again, I don't ever really know I was going to be setting off until I basically did. Still, I could have written." Pinky chuckled. "Yeah, would have been nice." Octavia chuckled back. "At least you didn't interrupt my performance this time." Pinky blushed while smiling, still remembering the gala. "Come on, let's go have some dinner and we can talk." Pinky dined on a fresh daisy salad, while Octavia enjoyed a French daffodil soup. "So, Pinky," Octavia started as she finished taking a sip of her soup, "what's with the sudden visit? I assume it has something to do with something that's bugging you." "Heh, I can't hide anything from you, can I, sis?" Pinky smiled as she took another bite of her salad. "Not really. Your hair doesn't go down unless you're upset about something," Octavia said as her eyes wandered down to the red ribbon in Pinky's hair. "The ribbon's new, though." "Heh, well, the two topics are related," Pinky said, before giving a soft sigh as she smiled. "I know I'm about to ask a lot from you, Octavia. What with you on your tour and all. And it's been a long time since either of us has brought this up." Octavia ate another spoonful of soup as she watched her younger sister curiously, not really sure of what to expect. "But I'd like the two of us to go and visit Bellamina's grave." Octavia nearly dropped the spoon from her mouth. She quickly swallowed the contents of her mouth. "This is rather sudden, Pinky," Octavia said, surprised that her sister would bring it up. "If that's what you really want, our next concert isn't until next week in Hoofington. So if we left now, we could make it to the farm with enough time to get back." "Oh, thank you, sis," Pinky said happily. "You really are the best big sister in the world." She chuckled happily. Sure. I'll do this so long as you tell me what's going on. Octavia smiled. Deal. Pinky smiled back. The wind blew across the rocky field as the two sisters stood before their younger sister's grave. It was a hand-carved rock marker, carefully crafted to look like their younger sister, sitting with a smile. She sat on top of a slab that read, Here lies Bellamina Marie Pye, a beloved daughter, a wonderful sister, and an angel in filly form. That's really quite a story, Pinky. Octavia looked at Pinky, but then back to her sister's grave. But it's good to hear that you've forgiven yourself for what happened. Octavia smiled. Yeah, I'm glad I did too. But I couldn't say it was official till I at least came here again, Pinky said, as she gently placed the roses she had picked up on her sister's grave. I'd forgotten about her because I didn't want to remember, and that's a terrible thing for an older sister to do. So from now on, I promise to visit her once a year. Pinky smiled happily. You know what? If you're going to do that, then I shall join you. Octavia smiled. I've been too focused on my work lately. I haven't given our sister the proper time of day, either. Thank you, Pinky said, nuzzling against Octavia. You're my sister. I've always been there for you if you needed me, sis. Octavia nuzzled her sister back, smiling happily. The sisters shared their happy embrace. Octavia, Pinkamena, dinner's ready. Their mother called from the farmhouse. Coming! Octavia called out. Come on. Let's go get us some dinner, sis. I'll be right there. Pinky smiled to Octavia. Octavia nodded and headed towards the farm. Hey, Bellamina, Pinky said softly, getting closer to her sister. You were a wonderful sister. Thank you so much for being my sister. I love you. She kissed the forehead of her sister's statue, then turned around and began to walk back to the farm. Her hair poofed out and curled, returning to her usual bubbly self. The end. Ending 6. Sam. Unlock condition. Place the tiles in a specific order in the final hallway. Then, go through the final door. I don't know. This doesn't seem right, she said, as she looked around at the plates. She had put the fish in the first box, the bird in the second, the cat in the third, and the snake in the fourth. Nothing had happened when she placed each of the plates, but something compelled her, told her, that this was what she was supposed to do. I guess the only thing left is to go through the door then, she said, turning to face the wooden door at the end of the hallway. The slender pony had gone through before, so she knew it had to be waiting for her on the other side. She walked up to the door carefully. She took a deep breath as she prepared for what was going on the other side. She put her hoof up to the door handle and pushed it open. You've got a typo here. It says, her voice was running out of patience. You spelled patience as patience. I guess she has sick people in her throat. The green pony, dressed in a ninja suit, with a green mane, joked as he read what was written before her. Oh, oops! A brown pony with a messy brown mane said, switching his attention from the screen he had been working on, rolling his chair over to the green pony. Thank you for catching that, Brad. The brown pony said as he quickly moved his mouse over the words and changed the typo. Not a problem. It's why you've hired me as a proofreader. Brad chuckled as he went back to reading. So, where are you in the current chapter? Well, I was about to have her go through the door to meet the final encounter with Slenderman. The brown pony's words were interrupted by the sound of a door opening behind them. The two ponies turned around and looked at the door. Huh? Pinky said, as she looked at the two ponies sitting there, before the giant machine that was littered with screens. Where am I? She looked around, confused. Is that Pinkie Pie? Brad asked, confused. I think it is, the brown pony said, baffled. Hey, where is this place? Pinky asked, walking further into the room, closing the door behind her. And why are you guys here? Pinky stopped in her tracks. Wait, you're not crazy and trying to kill me, are you? Sam? She broke out of the story, Brad said, pointing to his brown companion. Well, this is unexpected. I didn't think Pinkie Pie could actually do that, Sam said, scratching his head. What's going on here? How can you guys know my name? And what story? Pinky asked, even more confused as she looked back and forth between the two ponies. Well, I guess as long as you're here on this side of the fourth wall, you deserve an explanation, Sam said, shifting his hooves a little uncomfortably. Not sure how she'll react to the news that everything has been happening to her in the town was all his work. Though, this does present the perfect opportunity to write in the top hat and Crane dancing Pyramid Head, Brad joked. The end?